My parents left my younger brother a mansion worth over $800,000 in New York. They left me, a collapsing wooden cabin deep in the middle of Alaska. The day I found out, my fiancée slammed the door so hard the walls shook. She called me a useless failure, screamed that I'd never be anything more than a disappointment, and walked out of my life. That moment broke me. Humiliated, angry, and hollow, I thought my life was over. But when I finally flew to Alaska and opened that cabin door, I found something worth $50 million. That's how everything changed. That's how the story of Aaron Miles really began. Before I tell you my complete story, subscribe and comment where you're watching from. I'd love to know how far this story travels. I'm Aaron Miles. I'm 29. And I'm the oldest son in a family that never once believed I'd amount to anything. My younger brother, Ryan, was the golden boy. He was the one everyone admired, the one my parents said had the spark. My father, Douglas Miles, believed Ryan had the drive to carry the family name forward. And my mother, Elaine, though kinder, never once challenged his decisions. Ryan was their pride. I was the quiet background character in my own story. Rachel, my fiancée, was no different. When we met, I thought she was my partner in everything. She told me she loved my kindness, my calm nature, my dreams. But in truth, she was waiting for me to catch up to Ryan. When the will was read, she didn't just leave, she tore my confidence apart on her way out the door. "You're pathetic," she spat. "Your brother gets a mansion, and you get a shack? What does that say about you, Aaron?" Her words burned deeper than any insult my father ever threw at me. And that was the day everything I thought I had, love, family, pride, disappeared all at once. Growing up, I always knew I was the shadow. Ryan could do no wrong. If he wanted something, my parents found a way. If I asked for the same thing, the answer was always, "Be practical, Aaron. You need to earn it first." My father was the kind of man who believed the world was a battlefield, and only the ruthless survived. He thought toughness was strength. And he made sure I knew that I wasn't tough enough. My mother loved quietly. She'd whisper encouragements when my father wasn't around. But in front of him, she stood silent, supporting every decision he made. When Ryan played varsity soccer, Dad was at every game, cheering like it was the World Cup. I still remember one night when I brought home a short story I'd written for English class. My teacher had called it exceptional. I placed it on the dinner table, hoping for one small word of praise. My father barely glanced at it. Then he turned to Ryan and asked about next season's soccer goals. That silence, the silence that followed, was louder than any insult. Ryan grew up to be exactly who Dad imagined. He became a financial consultant in Manhattan, wearing tailored suits and flashing expensive watches. He lived in high-rise apartments with city views, always surrounded by people who called him inspiring. And me? I worked steady jobs, nothing fancy, but honest work. Rent, bills, groceries, barely balanced. Still, I tried to be proud of him. But deep down, I always felt that shadow pressing against my chest. Rachel came into my life 3 years ago. At first, she was everything I thought I needed, charming, confident, full of dreams. She said I had something rare. That I wasn't like other men she'd met. And for a time, I believed her. But love built on comparison never lasts. As months passed, her compliments turned into criticism. She started asking why I didn't dress like Ryan, why I wasn't ambitious like him, why I didn't fight harder for success. One evening over dinner, she leaned in and said, "Aaron, I just don't get you. Don't you want more? Don't you want to be somebody?" I told her I was trying. That not everything in life could be measured in money or titles. She rolled her eyes. "Well, tell that to the landlord when rent's due," she said. That was the moment I realized, she didn't see me for who I was. She only saw who I wasn't. Then came the call. Our family lawyer wanted both me and Ryan to meet in his office. It was about the will. My parents had both passed away, Dad from a sudden stroke, and Mom, not long after, from failing health. I was still grieving when we sat across from each other in that office. Ryan walked in with his usual swagger, greeting the attorney like a business partner. Meanwhile, I just hoped that maybe, somehow, my parents had left a message for me, something small but meaningful. When the will was read, I felt the air leave my lungs. Ryan was left the family mansion in New York, worth more than $800,000, along with most of their investments. I was left, a cabin. In the middle of Alaska. No explanation. No reasoning. Just a signature and a property deed to a forgotten shack in the snow. I sat there frozen, gripping the armrests of my chair. My face was burning with humiliation. Ryan smirked. He leaned over and said, "Guess Dad always knew who the real man was." That smirk, that little pat on my shoulder, it stung worse than the will itself. When I told Rachel that night, she lost control. Her voice rose so loud, the neighbors could probably hear her. A cabin? In Alaska? Are you out of your mind? Ryan gets a mansion, and you get a shack in the woods? You are nothing, Aaron. You're a pathetic loser, just like your father said. Then she ripped the engagement ring off her finger, threw it on the table, and stormed out, slamming the door so hard it rattled the frame. I didn't chase her. I just sat there in silence, staring at that ring. That tiny circle of metal looked heavier than my entire life. In 1 week, I lost everything: my parents, my fiancé, my pride. Every word from my childhood replayed in my head. My father's voice calling me soft. Ryan's arrogance. Rachel's cruelty. All of it merged into one thought: maybe they were right about me. For days, I carried that deed in my pocket, a cruel reminder of what my parents thought I was worth. A broken cabin in Alaska. That was my inheritance. I'd pull it out, stare at the paper, and ask myself, why? Why would they do this? Was it punishment? A message? A joke? At first, I thought I'd sell it. Get whatever scraps I could. Forget it existed. But one night, as I sat in my cramped New York apartment, staring at that paper under the dim kitchen light, something inside me shifted. If this was all they'd left me, then I needed to face it. I needed to see what they thought I was worth. That's when I made the decision. I bought a one-way ticket to Alaska. And that's where everything began to change. The plane to Alaska was small, the kind that rattles in the wind and makes every passenger grip their seat just a little tighter. I sat by the window, staring out over endless stretches of white snowfields, frozen rivers, and forests that looked like they hadn't seen people in decades. The sky was gray. The world below felt silent and ancient. In my hands, I held that deed like it was both a curse and a key. Every time I looked at it, Rachel's words echoed in my head: pathetic loser. Those two words had cut deeper than any wound. And now, they followed me through the clouds. When the plane landed, the cold hit me like a wall. It wasn't the kind of chill you feel in the city. This was the kind that bites through every layer of clothing and straight into your bones. The air smelled clean, sharp, untouched. The snow crunched under my boots like breaking glass. A driver from the small regional airline met me outside with an old truck that looked like it had seen better decades. He loaded my single duffel bag into the back and said, "Cabin's way out there, sir. Ain't much around. You sure that's where you're headed?" I nodded. "Yeah. That's the one." He shrugged and started the engine. The drive felt endless. Miles and miles of frozen wilderness, trees bent under the weight of snow, rivers locked in ice, the occasional shape of an old wooden house half swallowed by frost. The silence outside was haunting. No cars. No voices. Just the crunch of tires on frozen dirt. After what felt like hours, the driver slowed and stopped at the edge of a narrow path. "This is as far as I can take you," he said, pointing into the woods. "Cabin should be a mile that way. Maybe less. Good luck." He drove away, the sound of the truck fading into the cold air. And then it was just me, alone, with the snow and the wind. The walk felt longer than a mile. The cold burned my lungs with every breath. The forest around me was silent except for the creak of frozen branches. There were no trails, no footprints, only untouched snow stretching as far as I could see. When I finally saw it, the cabin, I stopped in my tracks. It looked worse than I'd imagined. The roof sagged in the middle, the porch leaned to one side, and one of the windows was cracked open, glass missing. The walls were dark and scarred with rot. The place looked abandoned, like it was waiting to collapse. I let out a short, bitter laugh. "Yeah," I muttered to myself. "Figures. This wreck, was what my parents thought I was worth." I dropped my bag on the porch and pushed the door open. The hinges screamed in protest, and a cloud of dust rose from the floor. The smell hit me immediately: mold, old wood, and time. Inside, it was worse. Broken furniture was scattered across the floor. The wallpaper, what was left of it, was curling off the walls. The floor creaked with every step, threatening to give way beneath me. A family of mice scurried from a corner as I walked through what used to be the living room. The kitchen sink had rusted through. The ceiling was stained from years of leaks. I stopped in the middle of the room, looked around, and whispered to myself, "This is what they left me. This is who I am to them." The words echoed in the empty air. I wanted to call Ryan. To yell. To ask him if this was funny to him, if this was all part of the family's final joke. But I didn't. Because I already knew what he'd say. He'd laugh. Tell me Dad was right, that I was never built to handle success. That this cabin was exactly what I deserved. The thought made me sick. But more than that, it made me angry. That night, I unrolled my sleeping bag in the least broken corner of the cabin. The air was freezing. The wind howled through the cracks in the walls. Every creak made me wonder if the roof was about to collapse. I pulled the bag tighter and stared at the ceiling. Rachel's voice echoed in my head again, "You're a pathetic loser." Over and over, until I couldn't tell if I was remembering it or hearing it. Sleep didn't come easily. When it finally did, it was the kind that doesn't rest you, just blurs the night into exhaustion. The next morning, I woke to silence. No cars. No birds. Just cold air pressing in from every direction. The fire I'd tried to build had long died out, and my breath fogged in front of me as I sat up. For a moment, I thought about leaving. Selling the place. Going back to New York, even if it meant facing Ryan's smirk again. But something in me refused. I couldn't go back beaten. Not this time. That thought burned hot enough to keep me standing. I spent the next few hours cleaning. Sweeping dust. Pushing aside broken chairs. Moving piles of old wood. Every motion felt like a fight, not with the cabin, but with myself. Every time I lifted a board, I heard my father's voice. Every time I swept, I saw Ryan's grin. Every time I looked at the ring Rachel threw at me, I felt that humiliation rise all over again. So I kept going. I cleaned harder. Faster. Like if I could just clear enough space, maybe I'd find a reason. A reason they left this to me. There has to be more to this, I whispered. There has to be. By evening, I was sore and exhausted. But I didn't stop. I couldn't. If I didn't find something, anything, I knew I'd leave this place broken for good. I dragged an old, dusty rug from the floor and pulled it aside. And that's when I saw it, a small, iron handle embedded in the wood. A hatch. I froze. The air felt different suddenly, heavy. I crouched down, brushed away the dust, and tugged at the handle. The panel groaned and lifted, revealing a dark square hole in the floor. A space beneath the cabin. A hidden cellar. My heart started pounding so hard I could feel it in my fingertips. For the first time since I'd arrived, I felt something that wasn't anger or despair. I felt curiosity. The air rising from the hole was damp and cold. The smell was like earth sealed away for decades. I hesitated, staring into that darkness, half expecting something to move. Maybe it was just a storage pit. Maybe it was nothing. But something inside me whispered that this was what I was meant to find. I grabbed my flashlight from my bag and clicked it on. A narrow beam of light cut through the dark. Wooden steps descended into shadow, worn, but intact. I took a breath, set my foot on the first step. It creaked under my weight. But it held. Step by step, I made my way down. The air grew colder with every foot I descended. My breath fogged in the flashlight's glow. When my boots hit the dirt floor, I swept the light across the room, and my jaw went slack. Wooden crates lined the walls, stacked one on top of another. Metal chests sat in corners, rusted but sealed. A large trunk rested near the back wall, its hinges corroded with age. The place wasn't random. It was organized. Deliberate. I crouched in front of one of the crates and pried at the lid with a rusted bar. The wood splintered as it came loose. Inside were cloth-wrapped bundles, tied with old twine. I picked one up, untied it, and froze. In my hands were gold coins. Dozens of them. They shimmered even through the dust of years, heavy, solid, real. I dropped one, and it clinked against another, echoing in the cellar. My throat tightened. I unwrapped another bundle, necklaces, rings, jeweled brooches. Old, intricate, sparkling with stones I couldn't name but knew were priceless. My flashlight shook in my hand. I backed away, my heart racing. The air in that cellar felt suddenly alive, electric. "What is this?" I whispered. But deep down, I already knew. It wasn't garbage. It wasn't punishment. It was a secret. A secret my parents had left for me, one that could change everything I thought I knew about them, and about myself. The weight of what I was staring at nearly knocked the breath out of me. Crates filled with gold. Jewels sparkling through layers of dust. Antique pieces, some clearly from another era. My flashlight trembled as I looked around, and a single truth began pressing down on me: this wasn't luck. It wasn't coincidence. It was planned. My parents had hidden this. And they had left it, for me. For so many years, I believed I was the disappointment. The weak one. The failure. But now, standing in that cellar with treasure surrounding me, my thoughts began to twist in a way I couldn't control. Why me? Why not Ryan? Why leave the mansion, the visible wealth, to him, and bury this, the real fortune, under a decaying cabin for me? The question burned, but beneath it, something else began to stir. Something stronger. Something I hadn't felt in a long time, worth. I moved the flashlight across the crates again. One corner of the cellar caught my attention, a large leather trunk, its lid slightly ajar. Dust covered everything, but it didn't feel random. It felt intentional. I knelt and opened it carefully. Inside were stacks of leather-bound ledgers, brittle with age, each one filled with handwritten entries. I flipped through the pages. Dates. Land records. Mining claims. Business dealings that went back almost a century. My family's name, Miles, was written on almost every page. My grandfather, Edward Miles, appeared over and over again. He had been a man I barely knew anything about, just a name my father mentioned in passing, always with a mix of pride and mystery. Now, here he was, the architect of it all. It wasn't just treasure. It was history. Generations of wealth carefully hidden, passed down through silence and secrecy. And now, somehow, my parents had chosen me to inherit it. The thought felt impossible. For years, I'd been told I wasn't enough. I'd believed it so deeply that it became truth. But this? This changed everything. I sat there for a long time, breathing in the cold air of that cellar, letting reality sink in. The man everyone overlooked was the one they'd trusted with the family's greatest secret. And that realization, it was both beautiful and terrifying. What if Ryan found out? What if Rachel heard? What if someone else knew? This wasn't just money. It was danger. It was responsibility. I closed the trunk and pressed my hand against the wood. I won't waste it, I whispered. Whatever this is, I'll protect it. Over the next 2 days, I barely slept. I cataloged everything I found, scribbling notes in an old notebook I'd brought. I reinforced the trapdoor with new nails, swept the cabin, and patched the broken window with scraps of wood. Every small repair felt symbolic, like I was piecing together my life, board by board. The cabin no longer felt like an insult. It felt like a test. I worked until my hands ached and my body screamed for rest. But I didn't stop. Because every hammer swing, every sweep of the broom, reminded me that I wasn't who they said I was. Not the failure. Not the disappointment. Not the shadow. Each sound of wood striking wood was a declaration, I am still here. At night, I'd sit near the small fire I'd managed to get going in the fireplace. I'd look down into that trapdoor, knowing what waited beneath the floorboards. Gold. History. Legacy. And yet, something inside me still felt incomplete. There had to be a reason. A message. Why had they trusted me? That question kept me awake for nights. Then, on the third evening, as I flipped through one of the ledgers, something slipped loose between the pages, a folded envelope, yellowed with age. My heart stopped when I saw the handwriting. It was my mother's. On the front, in faded ink, it read, "To Aaron." My hands began to shake. I tore the seal open carefully and unfolded the letter. The paper was fragile, but her words were clear. "Aaron, if you are reading this, it means your father and I are gone. What we left you is not a mistake. It is not a punishment. It is trust. Your father saw in Ryan something bold, but also reckless. He valued strength that shows itself loudly. But you, Aaron? You have strength that lives quietly. The kind that endures storms, not commands them. We knew you would protect this legacy, not squander it. Please forgive the silence of our years. You were never less than your brother, only different. We love you. Mom." I didn't realize I was crying until the tears blurred the ink. Her voice, her words, they broke something open in me. For years, I thought my parents never believed in me. That every time they praised Ryan and ignored me, it was because I wasn't enough. But it wasn't that. They had seen something in me all along, just not the kind of strength that needed applause. They had trusted me with their secret because they knew I would protect it. Not flaunt it. Not destroy it. But guard it. I pressed the letter to my chest and closed my eyes. For the first time in years, I didn't feel angry. I didn't feel small. I felt seen. Every insult, every moment Ryan mocked me, every cruel word Rachel screamed, all of it dissolved under that truth. I wasn't forgotten. I was chosen. That night, I sat by the fire and read her words again and again. I whispered to the flames, "I'll protect this, Mom. I'll make it grow. I won't fail you." For the first time in my life, I meant it. And for the first time, I believed it. But peace never lasts long. Because as soon as I began to understand what my parents had done, the world outside began to notice too. Ryan. Rachel. They were both coming back into my life, and not for love or family. They could smell change. They could sense there was something I wasn't saying. And I knew, deep down, they would stop at nothing to take it. The peace I felt that night didn't last long. Because the moment news about the inheritance spread, old ghosts started to crawl out of the past. Ryan called first. His voice came through the phone, sharp, smug, the same tone he'd used since we were kids. "So," he said, "how's life in your little shack, big brother? Real cozy up there, huh? Maybe you can build yourself a snow throne." He laughed. Then, more seriously, "Look, sell the place, Aaron. Stop embarrassing yourself. Everyone knows you can't handle anything bigger." For a second, I wanted to tell him the truth, that beneath this so-called shack was a treasure greater than anything he'd ever touch. That our parents had chosen me. But I didn't. I kept my voice calm. "I'm managing," I said. Then I hung up. That same night, my phone buzzed again. A message from Rachel. Aaron, I've been thinking. I overreacted. I miss you. Maybe we could talk. I stared at the screen, the words burning like poison. She didn't miss me. She missed the idea that maybe I had something now, something worth taking. I deleted the message without replying. And for the first time, I didn't feel guilt. I felt free. Days turned into weeks. The snow outside thickened. The cabin slowly began to change. I rebuilt the porch. Fixed the roof. Cleared out the broken furniture and replaced what I could with new pieces I crafted myself. Every nail, every plank of wood felt like redemption. Every sound of hammer meeting board was a small rebellion against the voice in my head that once said I'd never be enough. The cabin, once a symbol of rejection, was becoming a home. My home. At night, I'd go down into the cellar and study the ledgers. Line by line, I pieced together what my grandfather had built, the land rights, the mining claims, the resources buried beneath Alaskan soil. And with every discovery, I realized how immense it all really was. This wasn't just treasure. It was an empire hidden in silence. And my parents had handed it to me. But with wealth comes responsibility. I couldn't just keep it buried and hope no one found out. So I started reaching out, quietly, carefully, to lawyers, historians, and experts who could help verify the ownership records. I used a different name at first. Didn't tell anyone who I really was. The responses came slowly, but when they did, they confirmed what I already knew. It was real. Every claim, every deed, every ounce of gold. Real. And still, I told no one. Because I finally understood what my parents had done, and why. They didn't choose me because I was better than Ryan. They chose me because I wouldn't waste it. Because I wouldn't brag or gamble or let greed devour me. They trusted me to carry something sacred. Ryan had been given a mansion to show off. I'd been given a legacy to protect. And for the first time in my life? I was proud of that difference. Weeks later, Rachel messaged again. This time, her words were softer. Aaron, I don't care what your parents left. I just want you back. I miss you. I love you. I stared at the message for a long time. Then I smiled, not with bitterness, but clarity. Because I finally saw her for what she was. A mirror for the man I used to be, chasing approval, afraid of being alone. I deleted the message again. No hesitation. And just like that, the last chain of my old life broke. Ryan tried calling again too, leaving long voicemails about business trips, bragging about his vacations, his cars, his perfect life. He ended one message saying, "Enjoy your little log box, Aaron. I'll send you a postcard from Italy." I never called back. Because now, I didn't need to. I no longer lived in his shadow. He was still chasing the world's attention, while I'd finally found peace in my own silence. One night, sitting by the fire, I opened my mother's letter again. The paper was even more fragile now, but her words still hit with the same strength. "We knew you would protect this legacy, not squander it." I whispered the words aloud. Over and over. Until they sank into me like truth. My entire life, I'd begged to hear my parents say they were proud of me. And now, I realized, they already had. Just not in words, but in trust. That letter was their pride. That cellar was their faith. The man who had walked into this cabin, he was broken. Angry. Lost. But the man sitting here now? He was different. He was whole. Grounded. Alive. I wasn't Ryan's shadow anymore. I wasn't Rachel's disappointment. I wasn't my father's failure. I was Aaron Miles. And I was finally standing on my own ground. Weeks later, when I finally flew back to New York for a short visit, everything felt different. The city noise that once made me feel small now just sounded distant. Ryan didn't even ask how Alaska was, he just bragged about his mansion, about a new Tesla, about his perfect job. I smiled and said nothing. Because he'd never know the truth, that the real inheritance wasn't his marble floors or fancy view. It was the quiet strength that had been buried beneath a cabin in Alaska. And that strength was mine alone. Back in Alaska, I rebuilt the cabin piece by piece. By spring, the snow had melted from the roof, and the first green shoots began to push through the soil. The air smelled clean. The silence felt like freedom. I walked out to the edge of the woods one morning and looked back at the cabin, standing tall, solid, renewed. It no longer looked broken. It looked alive. And standing there, I realized something. The gold, the jewels, the land rights, they were priceless. But they weren't the real treasure. The real treasure was what the journey had made of me. The man who once thought a cabin meant failure now understood it meant faith. My parents hadn't abandoned me. They had trusted me, in their quiet, complicated way. They hadn't given me the easy path. They'd given me the right one. So when people ask what I'd do if I ever inherited a broken cabin again, I tell them this. Sometimes, what looks like rejection is actually trust in disguise. Sometimes, the forgotten, broken things in your life are the ones hiding your greatest gift. My parents didn't leave me behind. They left me ready. And I'll carry that lesson for the rest of my life. If you enjoyed this story, give it a like and share it with someone who believes life's biggest surprises often hide in the smallest moments. And don't forget to subscribe for more stories about families, secrets, and the quiet power of truth. And let me know in the comments what you would have done if you found a secret like this.